A while back, Crucible Tool released a new card scraper that was custom ground to a shape that chairmaker Chris Williams likes to use. And they sold out within a matter of hours. And when Chris found out about this, he posted the pattern for the scraper so you could make your own while they had a chance to rebuild their stock. What he didn't do is post pictures or video because he was traveling, probably for a teaching assignment. And so what I'm going to do today is try to kind of fill that gap and give you the lost video on how to make your own scraper. So the pattern that we're going to use is available on the Lost Art Press website. I'm using a blank card scraper from Arnaud, but it was actually too small to use this pattern. So I just did some scaling and found out that a 91% of the full size was what I needed to get the right shape. So I'm just going to cut it out and hold it over my scraper and trace the pattern. All right. I'm not going to be too precious about this. The final shape is going to be determined at the grinder. So if you drew a dip into the shape like I did here, just make sure you're really smooth when you grind it out. With that drawn, we're basically ready to go to the grinder and do a little grinding. All right, we're here at the grinder, and I went ahead and set up my tool rest basically at a 90 degree to the surface of the wheel. I want to grind this as close to square as I can because I'm just going to go back and have to file it square to clean up the grinding marks. So what I don't want to have to do is do a bunch of extra work squaring it back up. I've got a bucket with some water in it here. You'll see me testing the edge with my fingers to make sure it's not getting too hot. If it feels hot, I'm going to dunk it. Basically, the important thing is to just keep moving around the edge, take a little bit off at a time as you go, so that way you don't overheat one spot in particular. It's the same with all grinding. Try not to get it too hot. One thing I forgot to mention before I started was the key to avoiding divots in the edge when you introduce it to the wheel is to get it moving before you touch it to the wheel, so that you're moving across the edge and then you start to grind. That way you don't sit in one spot for a little while and make a little notch. All right, we're back at the bench, and now we've got to clean up these edges so that we can actually get them polished, which is basically the first step in sharpening a scraper. So we're going to basically draw a file, and I'm going to be sure to only push it across. I'm not going to pull it back across the wood. All right, here we go. So because this scraper is too thick to use in my little block, I'm basically having to eyeball square. And this step is going to help to even out any little low spots, high spots in the scraper. So I'm going to get the other side from this direction. And you can't see it with the camera, but I can look down here and see basically a different light reflection on the areas where I haven't cut yet. There's grooves running this way, and then the marks from the grinder are running this way. So it changes colors where in the spots that I haven't filed yet. So when those are all gone, I don't have any more low spots. I'm ready to move on. Okay, so we're nice and clean again. And I think since I wasn't able to use my little square block to keep everything perfectly square, I'm going to go ahead and put a little Sharpie around this edge to make it easier to see if I've stoned that edge perfectly square. We've got our stones. This got a 1,000 grit stone and a 5,000 grit stone. The 5,000 grit stone is for the sharpening step. This is still the prep work. This is a little piece of walnut offcut that's been planed to 90 degrees. It's been relieved on one corner so that splinters and burrs don't get caught up in there. And this is what I use to keep the edge square. We're not looking for absolute perfection in squareness, but the closer you get to square, the easier it is to know how far you're tilting the burnisher when you're drawing the burr and all that sort of thing. So the basic idea here is to use the block as a guide to move the card scraper along the stone. And you want to be sure to every once in a while, move your reference so you're not carving a groove in the stone itself. And you also want to make sure that you're working, as far along the curve as you need. I probably will only use that much of this edge, but occasionally you might need to use this curve, and then you would just come back, finish polishing it, turn the burr, and go to work. Okay, well, I'm happy with that side. I'm going to do the other edge. All right, so we've got an edge that's, got the same amount of polish as it would have, as your chisel would have after you did your primary, regrinding with your 1000 grit stone. And basically I've polished up to about here. For the kind of work that I do, which is large, flat surfaces and wide edges, that's probably all I'll ever need, but I'll have that curve there for the future if I do, if I'm working on a seat for a chair, for instance, and I've got a curve that's up close to the gutter that I want to get into. So this card scraper is in the same condition it would be if you had used it for a while and maybe you turn the hook on it 2 or 3 times and you're ready to resharpen. And we'll cover that in the next video.